what's up, comrades? Hope everyone's doing well. Go ahead, share, subscribe, comment, whatever. Okay, so next up is Fully Cooley, or in the English, FLCL. Yeah, but no, it's Fully Cooley. So what is this? It's Guy Max's follow up to Evangelion, if I remember correctly. I remember watching this, but then I watched the first episode and I barely remember any of this stuff. So I think I was someone else was watching the first episode, and I was in the vicinity. So some backstory. I worked at a computer lab in college, just a part-time job. Just I'd sit there and do my homework or play video games or whatever. And this is way back in the 90s. So they didn't have all the retarded security stuff they have now and whatnot. My primary job was to monitor the print queue for pornography, because it's not long ago. People would print porn off the computer at the college because they didn't have a computer at home, and I'm old, so there you go. But I had access to the building with the computer lab and the lab at all times for some insane reason. Because again, people just were better and lived more high quality lives back then. So I would sometimes we would just have huge LAN parties, and then I had a buddy who was a hacker sorta. And he would always have new shit and stuff. And we had a big projector screen in one of the lab rooms, the computer lab rooms. So we were always watching anime or movies that he torrented back when you had to torrent off IRC channels and stuff. Good stuff. Or not even torrent, just you downloaded shit. This is before torrents. So that was fun. So I think it was probably on at some point while I was playing StarCraft, the original one back in the day, or something like that. So good stuff. All right, so Fully Cooley, what's it about? It's a fever dream. So we start with a boy, Taro, I think, and he's talking to this girl, and this girl is trying to hump up on him, and we find out that she is in love with his brother and that they might have been in a relationship. We also find out later that his brother is a baseball phenom, and that he's out in America playing baseball, and also that he's got an American girlfriend. And the boy keeps wanting to tell this girl that, because she's kind of just hanging out with him, and she seems in a very miserable state per the first episode. She smokes, and then we find out later that her family's super poor and stuff, because she comes to get dry day-old bread from his family who runs a bakery. So it's him and his brother, his dad, and his granddad. So it's awesome masculine energy all over the place. They're standing there talking about some random stuff, and you get some over talk, where he's oh, the factory came into town, everyone was super excited, but nothing exciting here, nothing changes. And then this chick in a Vespa with pink hair rolls up and runs into Notaro. And then she's oh no, and so she gives him mouth to mouth to resuscitate him, and then he kind of freaks out, and she's oh good, you're alive. And then she takes her bass guitar, has there's a chainsaw thing in the back, an engine, and then she revs that and then hits him with the bass, and it leaves this crazy mark, and she's oh, nothing came out, that's funny, adios. And so then she pieces out. And then he gets a Band-Aid and puts it on because he starts growing a horn, and then he pushes it back in his head, and then he puts a Band-Aid over it, and then he gets some harassment from kids at school and whatnot. And then later on the girl calls him, and he's not the bass girl, but the other girl, and he's leave me alone, I just whatever, I'm not coming to hang out with you. And she's older, and at some point he says he's in grade school, but he's clearly in at least middle school, if not high school. So that's just bad translation. And then they mentioned that the chick on the Vespa looks like she's about 20, and then it looks like this other girl is in high school. So he might be in middle school, but he's definitely not in grade school. That's ridiculous. Anyway, so then he comes downstairs, and then we go from normal Japanese animation to black and white comics. So we just get shots, you're taking pictures of a manga as you're going along with the voice acting. And we find out that this lady hit the dad with her Vespa as well, because he comes out and she's what's she doing here? And I think it's Aiko. So then Aiko hit his dad with the Vespa, and so to make up for it, she's going to be a live-in maid for free. And so they start talking, and then at some point they start talking about Fully Cooley, which means fuck, I guess. Or Cooley Cooley. And so then she tells him that they're already in a relationship, because she kissed him mouth to mouth, and they're all, grandpa and the father freaking out. They're oh, what's gonna happen? Are you guys gonna keep Fully Cooley or Cooley Cooley? And then they do weird hand motions and stuff. It's pretty good. It's it's super ridiculous and super funny, and it goes on for a long time. So we get through all that, and then at some point she's up in his room playing or talking to somebody, and he comes walking. He's hey, you have to ask to be in here, and she's well, I'm staying with you. And he's And he's like, what? And she's like, yeah, I'll just stay on the top bunk because you're clearly sleeping on the bottom bunk. And then he's like, you can't sleep on the top bunk. That's for my brother. And then she's like, okay. So she just lays down with him on the bottom bunk, and he kind of freaking out about that. And so he heads downstairs and bumps into his dad, and his dad is like, hey, so I think it's like Rinako came by and just got some bread, and like, you know what the deal with your brother and her is? And he's like, no, not really. I don't know. But then he finds out that she came by, and he's like freaks out because she might be suicidal. So he runs over to this bridge where she's just standing with like the bag of bread, and they chit chat for a little bit. And sorry, I'm having trouble understanding you. At this point, what the fuck? Anyway, so at this point, at this point the boy finally tells her that her brother has an American girlfriend, and also Aiko is like snooping through all his stuff and sees that the brother has an American girlfriend, and then like she has this like bracelet with a padlock on it, and it starts to shake, and she's like, oh fuck. And so she hops in her Vespa and starts driving off to the bridge, and then the girl like passes out, and the brother, or not Taro, starts like his like horn gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and he can't stop it, and then it's like two robots fighting. So then the robots start fighting, and there's like a hand robot and then like a full-on robot, and he's like freaking out because he's attached to the one robot, and the robot that's in it, that's like the good robot, I guess, finally like destroys the hand robot, and then Aiko rolls up with her base and charges it, and then does like a giant, like a jumping attack to the red robot, turning it blue and like pacifying it. And then we get some overtalk where it's like, hey, nothing ever weird happens here, yada 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 yada. And then we get to his house, and now not only is Aiko like a live-in maid, but the robot is also a live-in maid. That's the end of the first episode. On to episode 2 of Flcl. This whole thing is like it was a lot, but also not a lot. So the situation in the home now is we got the dad, the granddad, the robot, her name slips my mind, the crazy lady on the bike, the bass, Ta-kun, and the robot. Okay, so the robot's getting abused by everyone in the house. Like, they're just sending him off to do random chores, and like at some point, bass chick is like yelling at him because she sent him to get like some sort of drink, like let's just say like a Monster Energy drink, but she wanted like the purple one, and he brought back like the black one, and so she like flips out. And then the granddad is doing the same thing, and Ta-kun is like not okay with this whole situation. Mamini is also around, being kind of like a sad, poor chick. Her thing. We hear that there's been a lot of, how do you say, like buildings being burnt down. Arson. That's the English word. There's been a lot of arson in the area, and these kids. And we meet like Ta-kun's like elementary school or middle school. I'm gonna go with middle school. I know they said elementary school at one point, but it just doesn't make any sense. His middle school friends, and he's like talking to Mimi, his brother's ex-girlfriend, who he hangs out with, who's in high school. And they're like doing whatever, they're a little back and forth, and then Ta-kun's friends like wander up, and he's like, "Oh, he's got an older girlfriend." And Ta-kun's like, "No, blah 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 blah." There's another girl who's like upset about it too, who might also have a crush on our main character, Kun. So we get that. We get another scene later where like Ta-kun and his homies are just like sitting around on a bridge talking about the fires, and then one of them's like, "Oh yeah, you remember that elementary school that burned down when we were younger? You think that's related?" And they're like, "What? That was so long ago. There's no way that's related." And I think the girl was like, "What elementary school?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, you came after that, or you weren't here for that whole thing, but yeah, some elementary school." And then we find out that Ta-kun's brother it was his school, and that he rescued Mamini from the fire, which is how they met and started dating in like elementary school or something. So Poma shows, which is important because we find out later that, okay, from what I understand in this like fever dream of an episode that I'm watching while I'm driving to work, so I'm not paying like 100% attention to what's going on because it's just kind of like I have it like hanging from the mirror essentially, and I'm just kind of like, it's like there in my peripherals. But it seems like Mamini is the one who's starting all these fires, and that she's the one who started the fire at the school because she hated her life and wanted to die, and she hated that place. That's what it seems like. So when she got rescued, it was like somebody to latch onto. And then we get another scene of her being poor. And again, from what I could tell, she's like cleaning her clothes in a river, and that's what Takun and his friends see her doing that from the bridge. And it looks like there's like period blood. So she's so poor, her family can't even afford like tampons. In Japan, which has socialized healthcare. So that's pretty rough. And remember, she was eating like stale bread that the family just like gave to her because, otherwise she's going to starve to death or something. We've never seen her family or like her go home. She's always like meandering about town. So she might just straight up be homeless or like have ran away from home or something. So whatever it is, it's like pretty tragic. Anyway, so the robot is like investigating all these arsons, and we see it picking up like things and like examining them from these arsons. And then the base chick, we find out that she like beat up and tied up like a nurse to steal her uniform for some reason. And then there was some other shady stuff, and we meet some of like, I don't know if it's her friends or like some other random people. Her and Takun go and talk to them about like, I don't even know, the mission. And then we see her also talking to like a robot screen looking thing. About how she found one robot, but it's worthless, and she's looking for or she's recruited one. And then she makes some mention to Takun about how he has nothing in his brain, or in his skull. He has no brain. He's just filled with like these robots, I guess, or like his brain is like a portal or something. And that he's been getting more horns, so he has like a headband. He's like strapped down as well. This all comes to head when Mamini is doing. Oh, and then throughout the episode, she's playing this game where you're like a guy who just like burns stuff down, and she keeps talking about like this fire god. And at some point she sees the robot doing something on like the ashes of one of these buildings that she burned down, and she's like, it's the fire god. And at some point so she's at the school, and she's got like a little ceremony with like these fire things and a headband on her head. And when I say fire things, I mean like lighters, like a grill lighter kind of thing. And then she's got like candles all around in like a circle, and it looks like she's doing some sort of bizarre ceremony. And the robot's picking through the stuff when Takun walks up, and he's like, hey, what are you doing? And then she's like, oh, it's the fire god. And then this is when Base Girl is like back at the house, and she's like, wait a second. And she like gets on her scooter and heads over to this area. So then So then Mamini goes up to like kiss the robot because she wants the blessing of like the fire god or whatever crazy delusions she's having. And then the thing in Takun's head like explodes out, like his horn like gets so big, and then there's a robot, and it throws him at the girl at the base, and she catches him, and then the robots start fighting, and our friendly robot is losing until he eats Takun. The fuck is this thing? And then he turns red. Remember, because in the last episode, the base chick hit him, and he turned from like red to blue, and then he's been chilling. But now that he's red, he's like powered up, and so then he's able to like destroy the other robot, and then he like spits Takun back out. And then there's like a fire in the background because she's lit like another fire. And he makes some comment about like the sirens. We didn't even notice the sirens going off in the background, but I knew that I would stay with Mamini and help her forever. And that's how episode 2 wraps up. Flcl episode 3 focuses on the girl who is Takun's age. It starts off with her getting in a car and talking to some woman who's going to drop her off at school, it seems. We find out this person is her dad's secretary, who they're banging. We also find out from Takun's like little narration that her dad is not the secretary, but his friend. I can't remember what her name is. She is her dad's the mayor of the town. And that there's like a scandal brewing because of this whole like secretary thing. And this girl is like very mature, and she's also the class president, and then she's like the star of like the play they're putting on. So her and Takun have like a conversation about how he's late and that he needs to show up for rehearsal so they can practice like Puss in Boots, because he's supposed to be Puss, I guess, the cat. They just keep referring to him as the cat. And then she describes the story of Puss in Boots without actually calling it Puss in Boots. And I guess she is the prince or something, or the princess. Anyway, yeah, it's a prince, I'm pretty sure. Or it's a guy who becomes a prince because Puss in Boots is like a genie in the story and like steals a bunch of stuff from like an ogre and whatnot. Anyway, none of this is relevant to the story. I was just thinking about it because I was like, Puss in Boots, huh? Good stuff. so there's like so we hang out with her for a while. He like doesn't go to practice and he's hanging out with Minami, and then we see that he has cat ears instead of like a horn or whatever this time, and that Minami's and there's a whole like cat theme where it's like pretending to be a cat and cat this and cat that and all this stuff. So that's fun with the Minami. And then we see her, she goes to like some shady manga dealer and she gets that. And then she goes somewhere else. And then Takun like runs into her and they're like chit chatting. And she's like, why didn't you go to the thing? And he's like, I don't want to do it. I don't want to be in a cat. And then there's like paparazzi trying to interview her and she's ignoring them. And then he comes along and like helps her out. And then the base lady like rolls in and like crashes into her with her scooter or something crazy because she's trying to avoid like a cat. Or she causes like this whole thing. And at some point, she runs into like Takun, who flies and like the lips of the friend and Takun, because she has like kind of like a crush on Takun, it seems, just based on the last episodes. They like kiss for a second, just based on the fact that their heads like touch while he's being thrown through the air. Anyway, we skip ahead and they're hanging out at his house and the dad's like talking about the scandal or whatnot and saying that she can stay so they don't have to worry about it. And they're also eating like super spicy curry, which Base Lady and Takun were like talking about earlier in the day, where he's like, I don't like spicy food. And she's like, I'm making curry. I'll make you baby curry. And it's like the baby curry is still super spicy. And so he's upset about that. And so people are having problems with that. And the girl's just asking a lot of questions. At some point, Takun heads to his room, and she's dressed in his pajamas, wearing glasses. And he's like, what, you wear glasses? And she's like, yeah, I wear contacts, don't tell anybody. And he's like, that's fine. And then they kind of get close. Like, he rests his head on, like, her shoulder for a second and kind of freaks out and all this stuff. And they're chit-chatting about, like, her parents, and they're, like, they might be getting divorced. And she's just kind of stressed out about all this stuff and has, like, a stomach ache. She has, like, gastrointestinal anxiety, essentially, which is very common. Like, people have a lot of anxiety, tend to have bowel issues and stomach issues because you tense up and hold so much that it like interrupts your body's ability to like digest food and just kind of the whole process. Super common. Anyway, they don't say that directly. That's just I know that's what's happening. Based on all the other, I mean, I don't know what the thoughts of the authors are, and I'm not going to look it up, but that seems to be what the issue is here. Anywho, they talk more about the play. The base girl's like talking to him, making fun of him. And at some point, the girl like touches his cat ears, even after the base girl's like, "Don't touch his ears. You're gonna regret that." And she does. And and that's the thing too. It's like after she touches the ears, she also has like she reports this stomach ache. So it could just be that, or it could be both, or it could all be like symbolic. I still don't know exactly what's going on with the show, to be completely honest. The next day at school, for some reason, the base lady and the robot are there, and the base lady gives like Takun a kiss on the lips, and that kind of pisses off the girl. And then they're going back and forth about this play, and he's like, I don't want to be in the play. Plays for kids. And he starts to walk off, and she grabs his hand, and they have like this fun scene where they're like facing opposite directions, and they're both in like shadow with everyone watching behind, like they're in a play. Right? There's a lot of like theater symbology in like some of the sets up of the scenes in this this episode, which is fun. And then what happens? He like knocks her hat off. I'm trying to remember who. So she grabs his hand and then he tries to get away. So he like knocks her hat off and then she knocks like his hat off and everyone sees he has cat ears. And then he says like the rudest thing possible, which is that she cheated. And she confesses to that before that she cheated because she's the student body president. They had like a vote who was going to play what roles, and she cheated on the vote so that she could be the main character and that he could be the cat, so they could be closer together, essentially, right? Because she has a crush in him. So he says that, and that's like the breaking point for her. It's like with Minami in the previous episode, like with the revelation that she's like the one who's starting all the fires. That's what breaks her, so that the robot comes out. Right, because then when he says that, she all of a sudden has the cat ears, and then the cat ears and then the horn pop out, and they turn into like a claw, and it turns into a big monster that like drags her around, and then the robot starts like kind of fighting the robot, but it's also trying not to fight the girl, and there's a whole ridiculous scene about like her bloomers coming off, and the robot tries to put them back on, and this is like a very PG rated show, to be completely honest, so like you don't see nothing, but it's like implied that like, oh no, she's pantsless, like, and the robot is like a very decent, upstanding, responsible citizen, so he gets the bloomers back on. They go back and forth. Eventually the robot and the base chick lead the new robot enemy up to the roof, where she pours a bunch of curry inside the thing's like maw or something, and then she also summons her scooter by whistling, kind of like what Batman the Batman thing. So the scooter comes and like knocks the teacher over, and then it hits like Takun, and the robot like leaps off the building while it's fighting the thing and lands on the ground, and then Takun gets like knocked from the building so that the robot can eat him and then turn into like his red super form. And then while the machine it eats the curry, it spits the girl out, and then it has to like use the bathroom. According to the base lady, he's like, oh, you gotta use the bathroom, it's over there. So then the robot goes over to like the side of the building to like poop or whatever, and then she hits it and it kind of like topples over, and then on the bottom the robot turns into like an artillery cannon and blows the shit out of it, and problem solved. Good stuff. We go to the next day or whatever. Oh, and part of the reason she wants the play to happen is because of her parents like maybe divorce. But then, that's like the point that comes up earlier. And then at the end, we get the overtalk, and it's like, oh, her parents ended up not getting divorced, and he didn't get prosecuted for having like an affair. And they showed up to like her play, and then it shows her dressed up like the prince, sort of with short hair, like she got a haircut because she had long hair before, and she's wearing glasses. And then Takun's like, hey, you wear glasses, and she's like, these are fake, and that's how the episode ends. And I'm sure that line is supposed to have some significance. But, well, I don't know what that is now. Possibly this whole thing is like fake. Like all this shit that's going on, or the city's fake, or there's a lot of that. It's a lot of themes of like people not being honest, and like the situation not being exactly what it looks like. In this episode, at least. I don't know. The other episode, maybe as well. Yeah. All right. The other thing to note is I'm old. So I saw this when I was like almost an adult. I was like 17, 18-ish, somewhere in there. Anyway, this came out in America. At least I became aware of it at that point. And they make like 2 references. What's that meme? If I had a nickel for every time Fully Cooley referenced Crystal Pepsi, I'd have 2 nickels, but it's still weird or whatever. I only have 2 nickels, but it's still odd. They came up like they're like 2 different people in 2 different parts of the show reference like drinking Crystal Pepsi, and I'm like, oh, fucking Crystal Pepsi, man! I love that shit back in the day. Like, no joke, I loved it. Like, it came out, and I was like, this is amazing, and then it was gone within like a year. So like, what is it? Props to Fully Cooley for referencing a Pepsi drink that existed for like one brief year in like a pivotal time in my life, like that late teenage, early adulthood. So everything, you like remember a lot more of that shit just because there were so many changes and so much shit going on that I was like, oh, Crystal Pepsi, hell yeah. Hell yeah. This next episode, number 4, focuses more on Takun's whole deal or whatever he's doing. Predominantly, it's done through the allegory of baseball. Now, if we remember all the way back to 3 episodes ago, his brother is on a baseball scholarship of sorts out in America. And that's why he's gone to that kind of, So he plays baseball on like this old man's baseball team. And the episode starts off with him and base girl, Hayuka, playing baseball, and she is crushing it. She's hitting home runs every time she's up, and it's like 44-0. And then every time Takun goes up, everyone's like, "Oh, this guy's supposed to be really good." It's like his brother, blah 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 blah. And he doesn't even attempt to swing, so he just gets striked out every time, like immediately. And then we get some shot. This other team that Takun's on is like freaking out because they're like, "Oh, what are we gonna do? What are we gonna do?" And then they see the robot doing very well, like catching baseballs, and it's like, "Oh yeah, let's get that guy." Back at the house, Takun's dad is giving base girl an erotic massage with his chin, and it's very like portrayed as sensual. And then later that evening, and he's very upset about it, and he keeps having these flashbacks of like where she like essentially says that they're together, like her and Takun, but then this is like going against that, I guess, on some level in his head because he's 12. Anyway, he's outside being kind of like upset when this guy with the huge eyebrows, which I say that because it gets brought up multiple times, rolls up on his scooter, and he's like, "Oh, spicy bread." He's very cryptic. He's like the smoking man from X-Files. You go to Google that if you're too young to remember. But yeah, that's how he's acting. He's acting very shady, and clearly he's got some stuff, and he knows more than he's leading on. And he's talking about base girl and like, oh, other women, and like, be careful, blah 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 blah. And talks about getting spicy bread, and the boy and him kind of go back and forth. And then Takun goes to bed. He gets up in the middle of the night and sees that Hayaka / base girl is not there in bed, and so then he goes, and it looks like she's getting railed out by his dad, and he's very upset about this, and it causes like, it looks like a satellite in orbit to start crashing into the planet. There's a whole section, I think it's before this. Yeah, there's a whole section before this, like after the man comes, but then before this nighttime stuff, where he gets her to teach him how to swing the bat. And so they practice, and she talks about aiming for like a star. And that star is the satellite, right? So it's all connected. Good stuff. We get a little bit of Me just kind of like making commentary on the side. Like we already like resolved her story, so she's like barely in this at this point. And then the friends from school are like not into this at all. Okay. So we get a lot of like, again, like every episode of Flcl, we get a lot of just like a lot of talk, a lot of words thrown around, and a lot of like references to things that are like, if I was not watching this while driving at double speed, maybe I'd be able to put more of it together. But it seems like, okay, and then there's like a control room with this guy, and there's like there's like this cute girl that is like his subordinate that keeps giving him like weird looks and calling him and keeps focusing on his huge eyebrows. And we learn from them that there's this government organization, and they have this satellite with a giant bomb on it as like a last resort, but somehow it got like pulled out of orbit, and then we know that's because of like Takun being upset because he thought he saw his dad banging out base girl, and he's jealous. Then what happens next? Oh, then there's like a baseball game that he's skipping, and he's hanging with Minimi, and she's like, "Why don't you play baseball? I thought you want to play baseball." And he's like, "I don't want to play baseball, not with her," and such and whatever. And she's like striking out the other team. At some point around here, he's home like alone, and then it kind of gets like creepy because his dad comes like stumbling out and is coming at him, talking about how we got like railed out by Hayaka, and then Takun gets super jealous and so hits him with like a baseball bat. But then the other guy shows up, and he's like, "Oh, you hit your dad with a baseball." Oh no! Before that, then Takun is like, "Wait a second, I don't think that's my dad because it seems like more of like a machine." And then he finds his dad, and he looks really messed up, so he takes him like cleans him off and bathes him. And then the dad's like, "Oh yeah, Hayako asked if she could borrow my head, and I thought she was teasing, but then she like almost killed me. I was dead for a while." and so then the eyebrow guy like is talking to him about the whole situation. The order of events is like messed up in my head. And he says, "Oh," and then Takun keeps saying he hit the TV, he didn't hit his dad, which is true because then the eyebrows man reveals that like his one dad is not his actual dad. It's like a marionette puppet that base girl created for some reason to do something. And she also mentions that like she likes his head because his head can hold stuff when no one else's heads can. Which I guess is where all these like robots and stuff are coming from. And then so no, he talks to the guy, and then he finds his actual dad, brings him back, they're talking, and then he gets like a call or something, or he gets contacted by the man and is like, "Hey, you got to get our friend over there to like hit this satellite out of the city so it doesn't blow up like the whole city because it wasn't supposed to fall, but it's falling, and she's the one who can do it." And he's like, "Okay, sure." And then she shows up, and he tells her that, and she's like, "I won't do it." "Well, you know what? I'll do it, but they have to pay me double." And it's like, "Okay, they're gonna pay." And he's like, "Fine, whatever it takes." Like, and he says something about this bomb being like a fail-safe in case like other things fail, and that she's playing for the home team now. So I guess she might have worked for this organization at some point, but then she went kind of rogue. Anyway, so she drives with Takun out to like a field where this thing's gonna like fall, and then she's like, "All right, you have to hit it out." And he's like, "What?" And then she like coaches him up on baseball and like pulls like a guitar out of his head. And then everyone's like, oh no, we're all gonna die because he's got like the yips. He's not gonna swing, and then he does, and he catches the satellite with his like guitar, and he's like, I'm doing it, and he's like throwing it back in orbit, but then the bomb's about to go off that's on the satellite, and that's at the last second. Haya comes and like smashes the bomb with her base, and then Takun like throws the satellite back into orbit, and it gets like it lands back in orbit and like is floating around, or it's like out in deep space. And then the control center people are like, phew, well that worked out pretty well. And then we get the overtalk by Takun, where he's like, he just says some stuff. Well, we sent the satellite up into orbit, and I did it. I finally hit it, and I feel pretty good. And now my hand's all shaky, and I'm all tuckered out from doing this. And I wonder if that's how Haya feels when she does all this crazy stuff. And then we get like a shot of her driving the Vespa with him like laying down in like a sidecar, I would assume, next to him, and she looks very serious and she looks very pensive, and he's kind of passed out. Episode 5 is another one where we get a lot of questions and no answers. All right, well, yeah. So it starts off, and Haya, the base lady, she's being very intimate with Takun. They're like hanging out in the room, and she's wearing like just a towel, and then they get on his bed, and she gives him like smooches, and then the dad sees it, and the dad likes her as well, right? And so then they like yell at each other for a little bit, and they decide they're going to have a battle for Haya, and she's like, yeah, boy, I love it. So they go out, and they're playing like airsoft guns in like the field. So it's Haya and Takun versus the dad and the robot. And we just get like an extended scene of that situation going on. And it's pretty fun and funny. And then Minami is like just standing on like an overpass, like watching all this go down. And then at some point, Takun's like, pause. I get a pause. And everyone stops. And then they see like a truck with like his friends, his high school friends. Not the, I was mistaken. The friends include a girl, but it's not the student body president. She was like in that one episode, and that is all she is around. But anyway, they roll up and they're like, oh, hey, what's going on? And he's like, oh, nothing. You don't see nothing. And they're like, oh, you smooching with this older lady still? And you got Minami, and you got the student body president. You're so popular, blah, 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 blah. And they're like chit-chatting about that and like laughing and making fun of him and going like, smooch, smooch, smooch. And Haya's like hanging on to him and everything. We also, at the same time, Minami's like standing up at the overpass. The assistant lady from the eyebrow guy shows up, and she's got like a big sniper rifle. And she's talking to the eyebrow guy who's getting like, he's like at a spa. And they're trying to destroy the robot when he's blue, because when he's red, he's too powerful. But when he's blue, they have the opportunity to kill it, and they need to kill it because, and this has come up before, I can't remember the name of that organization exactly off the top of my head. It's like the Machina Services or something, or Machina, Age of Machina, I don't know, something machine related. Is they're going to like destroy the whole planet if they don't like take care of this situation or something. So they got to destroy this thing. And so she tried, and then it like takes off, and she gets like kind of blown up by just like random shit that's going on. And then Minami comes up, and she's super angry at Takun or whatever because he's like with Haya, but it seems like she's more mad because he's not being honest than mad that he wants to be with Haya and not her. But then he wants to be with both, I guess. I don't know. He's talking about how he's like, no, I'm with you. I'm going to, because from episode 2, I think, he swore that he would like stay with Minami forever. And then they're going back and forth. And then we go to the eyebrow guy who's talking to the sniper lady, and she's now in the water, drenched, and her gun's broken. And the robot's like walking up on her, and she starts shooting at it. And then we go back to the spa, and he's getting like, and Haya's there, and she's dressed like the spa lady, and they start fighting and shooting at each other and all this craziness. And then back to Takun and Minami. They're having like an intense conversation, and then like a giant monster comes out of his forehead, of course, drags them up and causes kind of like a little explosion. And then everyone's like, the fuck? And so then Haya is like, hey, I need to borrow this. And she like pulls something out of his head, and she's like, ooh, it's so small. Takun's so much bigger, right? Because it's all the Fully Cooley thing is like, it's gibberish, but it's like everything's like sexual innuendo. And so she's like, bye-bye. And he's like, no, what do you see in him? Well, get back here. And he says something at some point indicating that she's like an alien, that she's not from this planet. And she doesn't like dissuade him of that information or whatever. Disabuse him of that information. And that they seem to maybe have had some sort of relationship in the past besides a working relationship. I don't know. It's kind of confusing. Anyway, so the robot is indestructible, and the lady stops shooting at him, and he like helps her get out of the water. And then he heads off as well because Takun and Minami are riding this monster that's trying to destroy the town. And Haya's rolling out there with her base. And now she's dressed like a bunny girl, which is very sexy. And they all kind of then it's the battle with the monster. And at some point, Takun has like gained confidence in himself. I don't know if that's like the whole point of everything in this story, is that Takun goes from being like a kind of a crybaby loner to like opening himself up and being assertive and like, you know, being a hero. Because that comes up a lot in this episode, right? But there's stuff that comes up in like every episode that seems like it sort of just kind of gets like, well, that was that. Fun times. And then that's the end of that. So I don't know. We'll see. There's one more episode, and so I'll try to figure out there if I can discover like an overarching theme for all this stuff. Yeah, I'm sure there is. But I'm not going to look anyone else's opinion up. I'm going to give my opinion based on what I watched. So, okay, so then Takun gets in the robot, and they defeat the monster, and then he gets spit out in front of his friends and Minami. And then the robot's there with like his cape looking like a superhero. And Haya's like, oh, and everyone's like, I think it's Adam. It's Adam. Oh, no, it's Atma. It's Atma. Yeah. And they're all like super excited. Like, oh my gosh, it's true. It exists. Or he exists. It's Atma. So the robot plus Takun, I guess, is like some super thing that we'll maybe learn more about later. But the end shot is the monsters. It turned into like a giant hand after it was like a giant tentacle looking thing. And then the hand gets destroyed by Atma, which is the robot plus Takun, I'm assuming. And then the friends are standing there. Minami's standing there. They're like, in silhouette is like a giant hand above like the factory that is like the centerpiece of the town. And then Takun's on the ground with Haya standing on his head with high heels, while she looks like she has like a very sexy bunny girl pose while looking up at the robot who's standing like a superhero. And it's pretty good. It's a pretty fucking epic scene. That's the end of episode 5. Final episode actually wraps up a lot of stuff, to be completely honest. Like, shockingly, a lot of stuff makes a lot of sense. All right, so we start off, and Takun is sad because Haya is, like, disappeared, and he's got this thing on his forehead that is normally like a Band-Aid or whatever. And he's just going around, and the eyebrow guy is, like, telling him, like, oh, she abandoned you. Her real name is this other thing. She's, like, an alien, and there's, like a pirate king who goes around, and her and the pirate king are enemies, but they stopped fighting because Atma disappeared or got captured, and so she came here to get Atma. And like, why did she get Atma? Why is she so interested in getting Atma? Because she's in love with it. And Atma's like this robot thing, or it's like a power, or it seems like kind of like ethereal, to be completely honest, as we get further in. So Takun's just kind of sad at school. He's kind of unresponsive to people. We get some commentary about random things from like kids in his class and whatnot. And then at some point, with all this stuff going on, and then at the same time, Minami's like, she found like part of the robot, like the robot guy who's also gone missing. And she's like feeding it to make it stronger and bigger. Like she starts feeding it cell phones and other things. And she's pretty bummed because like Takun clearly loves Haya, the base girl, like much more than her. And so there's like some jealousy going on there as well. And so everyone's kind of sad. Then Takun comes home one day, and I guess who's there? Haya. I guess his dad let her go to Hawaii for like a vacation for a couple of weeks or whatever, and now she's back. And then we get another one of these like manga kind of like comic strip looking parts, and it goes on for a little bit and gets kind of crazy. And then like the dad's like, we can't do this anymore. People complain. And then we tried doing this, and it gets very like meta or like fourth wall breaking for a little bit. And then that evening, Takun's like talking to, he's like, hey, hi, or he's like, hey, you awake? And she doesn't answer. And so he starts like, who are you? Where are you from? Like, what's going on? And then she like leans over and she's like, are you going to confess your love to me? And he's like, get out of here, whatever. And she's like, and there's like a whole thing where they like hug, and she's like, you want to come with me and just abandon everything? And he's like, yes. And so they do. So they go around, and then we get some more shots of like stuff at the school and the school stuff. Like students are like, God, I haven't seen that guy in like days. Like what's going on? Like he took off with that older chick, right? And he like abandoned like that high school girl, and Minami is, again, she's just like stealing phones and stuff from kids, and like this robot's getting bigger and bigger, and then she starts taking him to like electrical plants or whatever to like eat more machinery so he can continue to get bigger. And then one of the girl who's a friend, I don't know if it's the same girl because she's like a totally different haircut. It's like kind of confusing. But she has like some weird thing where she says like, oh, he just needs to confess his love. And they're like, have you done that? And she's like, yeah, I told my mom and dad I love them. And then she goes and does like this jump. Okay. It was an interesting shot. But I don't understand the meaning behind it at all. So besides just like my overall thesis about this is this whole show is just about a boy growing up and being assertive and taking control of his life and like not living in his brother's shadow and stuff. That's kind of the vibe I get. Just being his own man, essentially. And so at some point, the girl who's the friend, she like sees Takun and Haya just like sleeping in a sleeping bag on the side of the road somewhere. And the robot gets so big, and then the commander and the eyebrow guy and his like associate, they see it like because it gets so big that you can't avoid it, and it's like going crazy. And then they're like, oh hey, here's another robot that was hiding too, and it's just standing there like in a green suit, like a tracksuit or whatever. And they're like, oh my gosh, we gotta do something. And then the two like merge together and become big. And they're like, oh my gosh, we gotta take it down. And they're like shooting at it and stuff. And it's like going kind of rampaging a little bit. And also, like the teacher visits the dad at the home, and the dad's just like talking about whatever. He's like, oh no, Takun's finally doing what he wants. He's taking some time off and he's enjoying life for the first time. So again, it's a lot of the themes. So Takun and Haya, they ride the scooter to catch up with the robots so they can get Atma and do all this cool stuff. And the commander's talking about how like the Atma is becoming too strong and it's like taking over everything and smoothing everything out with like these like steam roller things, and that even like the Pirate King's already been smoothed out or whatever. It's like this big intergalactic threat was like taken care of very easily by like this Atma thing, but it's not complete, and it's not complete because it needs Takun. And at some point, Takun and Haya are running by on the scooter, and the commander shoots the scooter, and they end up on the ground, and there's like Takun in the middle and Haya and the guy, and he's like, what are you doing? You got to conform, essentially. And she's just standing there waiting for him, and he like turns and he goes and with her, and he goes and joins with the robot, and it becomes like super powerful, and it's like reaching up to the sky, and like all this stuff's happening, and the guy's just like going crazy, and then he's like saying all this stuff, and then Haya's like, I don't care about any of that stuff. I'm just here to save Atma because that's what I want. And then they're like, wait a second, and then Takun like comes out of the machine, and he's like possessed the power of Atma or whatever. He's become Atma or some crazy thing like that. And she's like, no, you took my power. How dare you, Takun? That I wanted to eat it. That's mine. And so then like spiritual like what is it in Dragon Ball Z? Like not insight. Oh shoot, I forgot. Anyway, like he's like Super Saiyan. He's like all glowy and red, and he's got two guitars, and him and Haya fight for a little bit, and then he defeats Haya, and then he comes down like right in front of her with the guitar, and like he's like, hey, I love you, and he gives her a kiss, and then like there's like these wings that pop out of the back. It's fucking crazy, and and then the power like flies away, and Haya's like, no, I gotta go fight it again. And then she hops on her scooter, and Takun just looking at her kind of like sadly, and she's like, you want to come with me? You're just a kid, never mind, I'll see you around sometime. And then she takes off in like her flying scooter spaceship thingy, whatever. And he just stands there, and then he goes up on a ledge and sees like her bass guitar, and he picks it up. And then Mini-Me this whole time is like shocked by everything that's going on. She takes like a picture of him standing there, and then we get like it's like years later, and now he's in like high school or junior high school, and he's wearing a uniform, and he's talking about like, oh, Mini-Me, like she said something to me, and then was like, and then I never saw her again. I heard that she took up photography in like another city. She like dropped out of high school and stuff. And he's just talking about the girl. He doesn't talk about Haya at all because she's already gone, I guess. And then he's with his friends, and he talks about how like, oh, there's a whole thing with this where he's like, I didn't realize there was anything outside this town, but she helped me understand there is more than this town. So it's like, again, that goes back to the whole theme of the show. To me, it just seems like he's stuck in a rut. He's stuck here with his dad and his granddad, and it's like generations of his family have just never left this town. But he might stay and he might go, but now he has like the ability to conceptualize that he can live his life however he wants, and he can leave. And it's like completely changed who he is and how he acts, and like the responsibility he takes upon himself to like make decisions. And that's also like the Mini-Me. She was stuck with the boyfriend who had left and had like abandoned, had like moved on from her. And so instead of moving on, Takun was going to be like dating his older brother's ex-girlfriend, and he was going to stay here and not do anything with his life. But it seems now he's like opened up, and like the clouds of the sky is like cleared, and like he's taken control of his life, and that's what he's going to do. So that's the kind of theme I'm reading from this. It's very good. I very much enjoyed it. I would recommend it. It's like 6 episodes. It's nothing. It's not even like, it's like 20-minute episodes, right? Like they're 30 minutes with the credits and everything. So it's like not even 3 hours worth of time, and it was very enjoyable. And some of it I watched in the car with my son while I was driving the daycare, and he loved it. he's like 3 and he just laughed because it's so ridiculous. Like it's like so cartoony, but it's very excellent. And I feel like the message I got at least was very good and it was very insightful. And I like the characters and interactions and the growth of Takun and some of the other characters, Mini Me and mostly just those two, and how they kind of like freed themselves from like the bonds that were holding them down, or at least the conceptualization of the bonds. So I liked it. Fully Coolly. There you go. So go ahead and like, subscribe, share, comment, and I will catch you all later. Bye.